Emily thought she could humiliate John at his father's funeral. She believed the empire he inherited was gone, and that he was weak, dependent, and exposed. She was wrong. Everything she assumed about him, about the money, about control, was the opposite of reality. And by the time she realized it, the decision she made would cost her everything. You're weak. You've always been weak. And now that your father's gone, there's nothing left to hide behind. The words cut through the low murmur of conversation in the dining room. Glasses clinked. Forks scraped against fine china. 23 people froze mid-bite, mid-sentence, mid-breath. The Christmas lights wrapped around the banister blinked red and green, casting shadows across faces that didn't know where to look. John stood near the doorway holding a glass of water. His father had been buried 6 days ago. The house still smelled like funeral flowers and casseroles from neighbors who didn't know what else to do. Emily stood in the center of the room, her voice steady and sharp, like she'd been rehearsing this. I want a divorce. Someone's fork hit their plate. The sound echoed. John didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at her with the same quiet expression he'd worn since the hospital, since the call, since everything stopped making sense. Emily's sister smirked from the couch. Her brother-in-law whispered something and laughed under his breath. John's cousin stared at the floor. His uncle stood up like he was about to say something, then sat back down. I'm done pretending, Emily continued. Your father's money is gone. The company's going to fall apart without him, and I'm not going to stick around and watch you fail. She said it like she was making an announcement at a board meeting, confident, final, like the decision had already been filed in triplicate. John set the glass down on the side table, took a breath, nodded once. Okay? That was all he said. Emily blinked. She'd been ready for a fight, for begging, for something. But he gave her nothing. Just that single word, and the kind of silence that felt heavier than anything else in the room. She turned and walked upstairs. Her heels clicked against the hardwood. The sound faded. A door closed. The room stayed frozen for another 10 seconds. Then people started moving again, slowly, carefully, like they were stepping around broken glass. John walked outside into the cold. Snow was falling, light and soft, the kind that didn't stick. He stood on the porch and stared at the driveway where his father's car used to be parked. The one he'd never drive again. He didn't cry, didn't call anyone, didn't post anything. He just stood there in the cold until his fingers went numb, and then he went back inside and cleaned up the dishes people had left behind. What Emily didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that the empire she thought belonged to his father had never been his father's at all. And by the time she figured it out, the papers would already be signed. But that truth was still 3 days away. If you think you know how this ends, drop a comment right now, because what happens next isn't what anyone expected. John's father had lived like a king. Penthouse in the city, lakefront property upstate, a garage with cars that most people only saw in movies. He wore custom suits, took meetings in boardrooms with views that made you feel like you were floating. And when he walked into a room, people straightened their spines. Everyone assumed he'd built it, that he was the architect, the founder, the man who turned nothing into everything. And for 30 years, he let them believe it. John was 11 when he started noticing the cracks. Little things. His father would get a call in the middle of dinner and leave the table looking worried. He'd come home late, smelling like cigars and stress, talking in low tones with his mother in the kitchen while John sat on the stairs pretending to do homework. One night, when John was 13, he heard his father crying. Not loud, just quiet. Broken sounds coming from the study. His mother was in there with him, and John pressed his ear to the door. I can't keep doing this, his father said. I'm drowning. The loans, the investors, the board, they're going to find out I don't know what I'm doing. His mother's voice was calm, steady. Then stop pretending you do. Ask for help. From who? There was a long pause. From someone smarter than you. John didn't understand it then, but he remembered it. By the time John was 16, he'd taught himself coding, finance, and systems architecture using library books and free online courses. Not because anyone told him to, not because he had some grand plan. He just liked solving problems, liked the feeling of taking something broken and making it work again. His father's company was hemorrhaging money, bad investments, poor management, a leadership team that spent more time posturing than producing. John started digging into the financials during summer break just out of curiosity. What he found made his stomach turn. The company was 6 months from collapse. He didn't tell anyone. He just started fixing it. Quietly, from his bedroom, he built an algorithm to optimize their supply chain, rerouted contracts, identified which divisions were bleeding cash and which ones could be salvaged. He sent the recommendations to his father in an anonymous email with the subject line, "You're welcome." His father called him into the study 2 days later. He looked older, tired, but there was something else in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or hope. "This was you?" John nodded. His father sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then he laughed. Not a happy laugh. A broken one. "I've been faking it for 20 years, he said, "and my 16-year-old son just saved my company in a weekend." John didn't say anything. His father looked at him, really looked at him. "If I give you access, can you keep doing this?" "Yeah." "And you won't tell anyone?" "Why would I?" His father exhaled. "Because I need them to think it's me. Just for a little while longer, until I figure out what the hell I'm doing." John agreed. He never figured it out. For the next 14 years, John ran the company from the shadows. He built the systems, made the calls, restructured the debt, launched the products that turned them from bleeding out to breaking records. His father played the role of CEO, showed up to the meetings, smiled for the press, shook hands and signed documents that John had already written. And everyone believed it, including Emily. John met Emily during his junior year of college. She was studying marketing, confident and magnetic in the way people are when they've never had to question their place in the world. She didn't know who his father was. Didn't know about the money. She just knew him as the quiet guy in her economics class who never talked, but always had the right answer when the professor called on him. They got coffee. Then dinner. Then late-night walks through the city where she talked about her dreams, and he listened like every word mattered. She told him she wanted to build something, that she didn't want to just work for someone else her whole life. She wanted to create, to lead, to matter. John believed her. They got married 3 years later, small ceremony, just family and a few friends. His father gave a toast about love and partnership and building a life together. Emily cried. John held her hand and thought for the first time in a long time that maybe he could stop pretending too. He told her the truth 6 months into the marriage. They were sitting in their apartment, the one they'd rented before his father insisted on buying them a house. Emily was going through wedding photos on her laptop. John was on the couch, staring at his phone, trying to figure out how to say it. "My father's company," he said. "It's not really his." Emily looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean I run it. I've been running it since I was 16. He's the face, I'm the engine." She closed the laptop, stared at him. "You're serious?" "Yeah." She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. "So you're telling me your dad's been pretending to be a CEO for 14 years? "Basically." "And no one knows?" "No one." She shook her head. "That's insane." "I know." She stood up, paced the room, then sat back down. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it didn't matter. It still doesn't. It does if people find out. They won't. But Emily's face had already changed. There was something new in her eyes, something John couldn't name yet, but would recognize later. Ambition. For the first 2 years of marriage, things were good. Emily started her own consulting business. Small clients at first, then bigger ones. She was good at what she did, charismatic, strategic. People liked her. John supported her, gave her advice when she asked, stayed out of the way when she didn't. He kept running his father's company from behind the curtain, and Emily kept building her own name in the light. But somewhere around year 3, things shifted. Emily started asking more questions about revenue, about assets, about how much the company was really worth. She wanted to know who owned what, how the board was structured, whether John's father had a succession plan. John answered honestly, maybe too honestly. When he retires, it's mine, officially, but practically, it already is. Emily smiled. So we're set. We're fine. No, she said. We're set. John didn't correct her. By year 5, Emily had stopped talking about her business. She talked about their portfolio, their properties, their net worth. She started making comments about his father's spending, about how much he traveled, about how he should be thinking about stepping down. He's 68, she said one night over dinner. He should be enjoying retirement, and you should be getting credit for what you've built. I don't need credit. Maybe you should. John let it go. He always let things go. It was easier than fighting. Easier than explaining that he didn't care about the title or the recognition. He cared about the work, about solving the problems no one else could see. But Emily cared, and that changed everything. When John's father got sick, it happened fast. One day he was fine. The next he was in the hospital with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and a timeline measured in weeks, not months. John spent every day at the hospital. Emily came twice. Once to drop off flowers, once to ask if they needed to talk to an estate attorney. Not yet, John's mother said. Emily left 20 minutes later. John's father died on a Tuesday morning in early December. The room was quiet. John was holding his hand. His mother was on the other side of the bed. The machines beeped once, twice, then flat-lined into a sound that John would hear in his sleep for months. His father's last words were, "You did good, kid." John didn't cry at the funeral, didn't cry at the burial, didn't cry when they got back to the house and people filled the rooms with sympathy casseroles and memories that felt too loud. He just moved through it, numb, hollow, like he was watching himself from a distance. Emily watched him too, but not with sympathy, with something colder. The Christmas party wasn't supposed to be a party. It was supposed to be a small family gathering. Just close relatives and a few old friends of his father's. Something quiet to get through the holidays without pretending everything was fine. Emily insisted on hosting. She hired a caterer, sent out invitations, bought a tree and had it decorated like they were trying to win a magazine spread. People need something normal, she said. Your dad would have wanted that. John didn't argue. He didn't have the energy. The house filled up around 6. People brought wine and wrapped gifts and tried to pretend the grief wasn't sitting in the corner like an uninvited guest. John stayed near the edges, refilled drinks, made small talk, smiled when people told him his father had been a great man. Emily worked the room like she was campaigning, laughing, touching arms, playing hostess with the kind of confidence that made people feel like everything was under control. Around 8, she asked everyone to gather in the dining room, said she wanted to make a toast. People shuffled in, glasses in hand, curious and a little tipsy. John stood near the doorway. His cousin sat at the far end of the table. His uncle leaned against the wall. Emily's sister smirked from the couch. Emily stood in the center and raised her glass. I just want to say thank you all for being here. I know this hasn't been an easy time. Losing someone like John's father, it leaves a hole, and I think we're all trying to figure out how to move forward." People nodded. Someone said, "Hear, hear." Emily's expression shifted. The warmth drained out of it. "But I also think it's important to be honest. And the truth is, I can't do this anymore." The room went still. "I've spent 6 years watching John hide behind his father, watching him take the easy road. And now that his father's gone, I don't see a man who's ready to step up. I see someone who's lost, who's weak, who doesn't know how to stand on his own." John's cousin looked at him, then at Emily, then back at him. "I want a divorce." The air left the room. Emily kept going. "I'm not going to apologize for choosing myself, for refusing to go down with a sinking ship. His father's money is gone. The company's going to collapse, and I'm not sticking around to watch it happen." She set her glass down. "I'm sorry if that's uncomfortable, but it's the truth." John stood there, didn't move, didn't blink, just looked at her with the same quiet expression he'd had since his father died. "Okay." That was all he said. Emily stared at him, waiting for more, for anger, for begging, for something, nothing. She turned and walked upstairs. The room stayed frozen. Then slowly people started moving again, whispering, looking at John like they didn't know whether to comfort him or leave. John walked outside into the snow, stood on the porch, breathed. Inside, Emily's sister was already on her phone, texting someone, smiling. What none of them knew, what Emily would learn 72 hours later, was that the company she thought was crumbling had just closed its most profitable quarter in its history, and the man she thought was weak had already made a call that would change everything. If you're wondering what Emily's about to find out, hit that subscribe button, because this story doesn't end with silence. John didn't sleep that night. He sat in his father's study, staring at the files spread across the desk. Legal documents, tax records, board minutes. The paperwork his father had signed over the years with John's strategies behind every sentence. The company was worth $470 million. John owned 62% of it through a trust his father had set up when he turned 21. The board didn't know. The investors didn't know. Even his mother didn't know the full scope. His father had protected him, kept his name out of the spotlight, let him build in the shadows while taking all the heat, all the scrutiny, all the pressure. And now he was gone. John picked up his phone, opened his contacts, scrolled to a name he hadn't called in 8 months. Marcus Chen answered on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd reach out," Marcus said. His voice was calm, the kind of calm that came from never being surprised. "I need a lawyer," John said. "Divorce?" "Yeah." "She doesn't know, does she?" "No." Marcus exhaled. "When do you want to file?" "Tomorrow." "Aggressive, I like it. What are we protecting?" "Everything." There was a pause. Then Marcus laughed, not meanly, just knowingly. "She picked the wrong week to burn that bridge." John hung up and sat back in the chair. He wasn't angry, wasn't hurt. He was just done. Done pretending. Done protecting people who didn't protect him. Done being invisible. Emily filed first. She beat him by 4 hours, claimed irreconcilable differences, and requested a 50-50 asset split based on the marriage's duration and her contributions to household stability and partnership support. Her lawyer was expensive, loud, the kind of guy who wore cufflinks and talked about winning. John's lawyer was quieter, sharper, the kind of guy who didn't need to talk about winning because he already knew the outcome. The first meeting happened a week later. A conference room downtown, big windows, polished table, coffee no one drank. Emily walked in looking confident. Her lawyer carried a leather briefcase and a smile that said he'd done this 1,000 times. John sat across from them with Marcus. No briefcase, just a tablet. Emily's lawyer opened with a rehearsed line about fairness and partnership and equitable distribution. He slid a document across the table outlining Emily's requests. Half of the house, half of the investment accounts, half of the projected value of the company. Marcus didn't touch the paper. He just looked at it. Then at Emily. You're claiming half of a company you've never worked for, never contributed to, and never owned a single share of? Emily's lawyer jumped in. Mrs. Emily supported Mr. John throughout the marriage, enabling him to— To what? Marcus interrupted. To run a company she didn't know he ran? To build an empire she thought belonged to his father? To make financial decisions she had no involvement in? Emily's face changed, just slightly. A flicker of confusion. Marcus slid his own document across the table. This is the prenuptial agreement you signed 6 years ago. Emily's lawyer opened it. His expression went from confident to concerned in under 10 seconds. This can't be enforced, he said. It was drafted by 3 separate firms and notarized in front of witnesses. It's airtight. Emily grabbed the document, started reading. Her hands shook. Just a little. Just enough. I didn't know what I was signing, she said. You had independent counsel present. You signed voluntarily. You initialed every page. I didn't understand what it meant. Marcus leaned forward. It means you get exactly what you brought into the marriage, which according to our records was $18,000 in personal savings and a car you traded in 2 years ago. Emily's lawyer tried to recover. We can challenge this. Coercion, duress, lack of disclosure. Good luck, Marcus said, because Mr. John disclosed everything, including the company, including his role, including the assets. It's all in the appendix. Emily flipped to the back. Her face went pale. There it was, in black and white. The truth she'd never bothered to look for. John wasn't the passenger. He was the driver. He always had been. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. Emily left without saying a word. Her lawyer followed, already making calls. John stayed in his seat. Marcus closed his tablet. You okay? Yeah. She's going to fight this. Let her. Marcus smiled. She's got no idea who she's fighting, does she? John didn't answer. He just stood up and walked out into the cold. Emily tried everything. She hired a second lawyer, then a third. She filed motions, requested depositions, demanded full financial disclosures. Every time Marcus responded with documents she couldn't refute, bank records, tax filings, corporate structures, emails between John and his father dating back 14 years outlining every decision, every strategy, every move that had kept the company alive. The narrative she'd built in her head, the one where John was weak and dependent and lucky, crumbled under the weight of evidence she couldn't spin. The board found out 2 weeks later, not because John told them, because Emily did. She called a meeting, demanded answers, accused John of fraud and deception and hiding behind his father's name. The board listened. Then they voted. Unanimous confidence in John. Effective immediately, he would assume the title of CEO. His father's seat would be retired. Emily's accusations became public record. Industry blogs picked it up. Then local news. Then national outlets. The headlines were brutal. Widow attempts to claim fortune she didn't know existed. CEO's son reveals he was the mastermind all along. Divorce goes public after wife files against company. She thought was failing. Emily's consulting business lost 3 clients in 2 days, then 8 more. Her reputation, the one she'd spent years building, evaporated in 72 hours. She called John 6 times. He didn't answer. She showed up at the house once. The locks had been changed. She sent an email. Subject line, "We need to talk." John deleted it without reading, because there was nothing left to say. John didn't celebrate, didn't gloat, didn't post anything on social media or give interviews. He just kept working. The company grew, expanded into 3 new markets, hired 200 people, opened offices in Austin and Denver. John's face appeared in business journals, but he never smiled in the photos. He just looked like what he was, someone who'd been doing the work long before anyone was paying attention. He set up a scholarship fund in his father's name. Full rides for first-generation college students studying engineering and business. The first year, they gave out 12 scholarships. The second year, 40. He bought his mother a house near the lake. Nothing flashy, just quiet and safe and hers. He didn't date, didn't go out, didn't try to fill the silence with noise. He just built. Emily tried to rebuild too. She rebranded, changed her consulting firm's name, moved to a different city, started over, but the internet doesn't forget. And neither do clients who Google your name before signing contracts. She ended up working for someone else. A mid-level position at a marketing firm that didn't ask too many questions. She posted occasionally. Inspirational quotes about resilience, photos of coffee cups and sunsets. No one commented. 3 years after the divorce, John got an email from Emily. The subject line was blank. "I'm sorry, I was wrong. I didn't understand who you were. I just wanted you to know that." John read it twice. Then he closed his laptop and went back to work. He never replied, because some apologies come too late. Some bridges burn too completely. And some people spend their whole lives mistaking silence for weakness. Emily had mistaken his quiet for dependence, his grief for fragility, his patience for lack of spine. She'd gambled on the idea that he needed her more than she needed him, and she'd lost everything on that bet. 5 years after the funeral, John stood in the same house where Emily had announced the divorce. It had been renovated, repainted, the memories stripped out and replaced with something cleaner. He was hosting a small gathering, just employees, people who'd been with the company since the beginning, people who'd worked late nights and taken risks and believed in something bigger than themselves. No speeches, no toasts, just food and conversation and the kind of easy laughter that comes from shared purpose. Someone asked him if he ever regretted the way things went down. John thought about it. No, not even a little. "She made a choice," he said. "I just let her live with it." The room stayed quiet for a moment. Then someone changed the subject and the night went on. Later, after everyone left, John stood on the porch. Snow was falling again, light and soft, the kind that didn't stick. He thought about his father, about the study, about the night he'd heard him crying and decided to fix what was broken. He thought about Emily, about the moment she'd stood in the center of the room and decided he wasn't worth fighting for. And he thought about the kid he used to be, the one who solved problems in the dark because no one asked him to, the one who built empires in silence because the work mattered more than the credit. He didn't feel angry, didn't feel vindicated, didn't feel anything except the quiet certainty that he'd done what needed to be done. The snow kept falling. John went inside, locked the door, and turned off the lights. Some stories don't end with fireworks. Some end with a door closing softly and a man walking away from the noise. This was one of those stories. If someone underestimated you and you proved them wrong without saying a word, drop that story in the comments. I want to hear it. And if you made it this far, hit that like button. Because the next story. If stories like this resonate with you, you already get it. By subscribing, you're telling the algorithm you want more of this, and you're joining the few who love stories like this too. Don't just watch and leave. Be part of the group.